Welcome back to the Personality Hacker Podcast. My name is Joel Mark Witt.
And I'm Antonia Dodge.
So this week we are continuing a short series on the Enneagram, the centers of intelligence, the obstacles in the centers of intelligence. And we have what I consider world-class Enneagram experts here, Dr. Beatrice Chestnut and Uranio Paes. Welcome back to Personality Hacker this week.
Good to be here.
Thank you, Joe and Antonia.
Excited to continue our conversation. On the last episode, we talked about the center of intelligence that is the body center of intelligence. This is Enneagram 8s, 9s, and 1s. And in this week, we're going to talk about the center of intelligence that is 2, 3, and 4 in the Enneagram system, and that is the heart center of intelligence. Before we do that, though, in case someone's a new listener or they didn't hear the last episode, we talked about this. Let me just pick on Beatrice. Beatrice, could you just give us a quick definition, overview of the Enneagram system itself, and then maybe just talk about what do we mean by centers of intelligence, just to frame us so we know what we're talking about this week.
Yes, the Enneagram is a 9-pointed star inscribed in a circle, and it is a symbol that derives from ancient wisdom teachings. And in the modern era, the way we're going to be using it is this diagram is, full of meaning, but more than anything else, it's a symbol of transformation, of how we can grow. And it gives us a system of 9 interconnected personality types that when you find which type you are, it sheds a lot of light on your unconscious patterns and also helps you become more whole, more balanced by knowing what your particular personality type tends to overdo, both in terms of focusing attention and ways of operating in the world. And by learning more about your personality patterns, which is a kind of default mode, you can recognize how you might need to go beyond that. So we learn about our personality so we can use it as a teacher to help us learn more about who we really are and manifest more of our full potential.
And so these 9 types are split into 3 different centers of intelligence. In the last episode, we talked about the gut center of intelligence, or body center. What is the center of intelligence, though, before we move into the heart?
Sure. The Enneagram model is based on an idea that we have 3 co-equal centers of intelligence as humans. All 3 of these centers are very important, and we need all 3. So there's the head center that thinks, that analyzes, the heart center, that's the center of emotions and relating to others through empathy. And then there's the body center that's more oriented toward taking action or not taking action, having a gut sense of things, a kind of kinesthetic intelligence. And the idea is that as humans, when we identify with a personality, we have all 3 of these centers and they're working in an interconnected way all the time. However, by definition, when we identify with our personality, when we think that's all of who we are out of balance. And one way we're out of balance is we tend to privilege one center more than the others. Now, of course, this is very unconscious, but it's like living more based in or living more from one center much more than the other 2. Now, this in itself can be hard to discern. If you ask a type what center they're coming from, a person, they may not know, because it can be a little bit tricky to figure that out. But once you understand the Enneagram system and the types, you recognize that these 3 different centers have very different functions. And when we identify more with one than the other 2, it means our whole experience is colored more by that one center than it is equally by the 3.
So we made a note of this in the last podcast. I just want to make a quick note of it in this episode. Your center of intelligence may not seem to have an elegant one-to-one correlation with, say, your Myers-Briggs type. So if you're listening to us, Personality Hacker, you probably are a Myers-Briggs enthusiast, because that's what primarily the system we talk about. And you can be all sorts of combinations. So it's important to remember that, like, you can be an intuitive that's a body type. I'm a thinker in the Myers-Briggs system that happens to be in the heart center that we'll be talking about in this episode. And you, Joel, are a feeler in the Myers-Briggs system that happens to be in the head center of intelligence, which we'll talk about in the next episode. So you can have all sorts of different combinations. Just want to make a note of that as we talk about this center of intelligence. If you are not a feeler, that's okay. That you might still identify with some of these key characteristics and obstacles felt in the heart center of intelligence. I just want to make a little note on that. Let's go into the heart center of intelligence. What are some of the key characteristics of a person who might identify this way? And then we can roll into some of the benefits, some of the things that you have access to, but then also some of the obstacles you might face.
Yeah, in the Enneagram, the heart types and the heart center of intelligence has to do with people whose main filter of perception of reality is the heart. And therefore, they process reality through feelings more than thoughts and more than sensations. Regardless of the person coming across as being emotional or not, heart type people use the heart to have a sense of what's happening around them. So as a consequence, they have a very good emotional reading of people. They can very easily tell you what is the current emotional state of someone, even if it's someone that has just entered the room. It's a heart's wisdom of connecting to the other person's heart. And connection, by the way, is something big for heart types. And they really suffer when they disconnect or when they think the other person is disconnecting. Now, heart types have a challenge, all of them, 2s, 3s, and 4s, the three heart types, a challenge with needing continuous approval and recognition, and also feedback, like reassurance. This is something that is present for all heart types. And while all of us need approval and recognition, heart types need it very much and in a continuous way, as I said. So that creates sometimes some problems, because for the other person, if the other person isn't a heart type, it's not very natural to keep giving them the constant positive feedback that they look for. And one last thing about more generic about heart types is that they are more concerned with image in general, how I am being seen. And so who am I in the eyes of the other people? And that can become a little bit too much of a concern. And they lose touch with their own appreciation of who they are.
So if the core emotion, we talked about the core emotion last week of the body types is anger, is there a core emotion that is being felt in this center of intelligence?
Yes. So heart types are generally, of course, more based in feeling their emotions. On one level, all the emotions are more heightened. And as Uranio said, it's like a filter through which they experience the world, not only their emotions, but the way they connect to other people through feeling even into the emotions of others and sensing the connection between them and others through that emotional channel. The core emotion that these three types are in relationship to in a fundamental way is sadness. The sadness grows out of a deeper experience in life of usually starting early on in life, of not feeling a sense of being loved for who they essentially are as a person, but for what they do for others, or the image they create, or the persona that they put out into the world. It's like I get more approval or more rewards or more affirmation from the outside world when I act a different way than I truly am. So each of the three types do that in three different ways. 2s try to create an image of being supportive and pleasing and likable and helpful. 3s create an image of being successful and competent. And 4s create an image of being unique or special or extraordinary in some way. And so each of these types sort of focuses on image and how they're perceived by others in order that they can create a positive impression or create that connection. And the sadness grows out of this deeper sense of not being loved for who I truly am, but being approved of for what I kind of turn myself into to create a connection with others. And it's really important to state that, similar to anger, it's not like all these three types go around feeling sad all the time, not at all. One type overdoes that experience of sadness, lives in it maybe too much. That's type 4. One type isn't really in touch with it as much. That's type 3. And one type is kind of in conflict with it. Sometimes they repress it because they're trying to be happy to create a positive image because other people like happy people. Sometimes they're more in it because it's there, it's underneath, and it bubbles up when they're rejected or when they feel like the world doesn't see them or affirm them in the way they might like to be affirmed.
Would you say that this core emotion, and I'm going to retrospectively apply this to the last podcast too, when we talked about anger for the body types, but each of the different personality types is basically a strategy of having to deal with this core emotion, like this uncomfortable, maybe not pleasant, maybe like, what do I do with this? In order to deal with it, then you create an entire almost like life script to be able to respond to this emotion that, or is the emotion the emergent too? It's actually a feeling underneath, the narrative that I'm not being accepted for who I am. I'm being accepted for what I do. And that's the core nucleus of it. And then the emotion is an emergent, and then the type is a strategy for dealing with that emotion. Does that make sense?
Yes. And I want to hear what Uranio says about this. But what I would say is, I want to always remind people that a lot of what we're going to be talking about tends to be unconscious. People being aware of sadness or aware of some of these patterns is something to be achieved through doing Enneagram-based work. And then the other thing I would say is, while I absolutely think it's true that the heart types' adaptive strategies in the world are connected to this experience of sadness, it's not the only thing that shapes their personality. It's just one of the main things that shapes their experience and their expression.
Okay, so don't put too much cause effect on all this. This is like one node in the system of how your personality emerges. This is one of the big ones. You're trying to deal with, sadness, but there are other key components you're saying that also are part of why these life scripts or these strategies for dealing with things, they're responses to more than just one thing. Like, you couldn't say that sadness is the nucleus.
Right. It's a very important shaping factor, influential factor. It's not the only one.
Okay, thank you for clarifying that, because I'm in my attempt to wrap my head around all of it, I tend to sort of try to find that underlying principle, but I also understand that every system has many underlying principles that need to be, seen and understood and sort of handled.
And in the Enneagram, there's usually 3 underlying principles.
Right. Which is probably too deep for this particular episode, but that's good to know. Could you just quickly name them if a person wants to go do more research on it? What are the 3 underlying principles?
Well, one way of saying it might be there's a core mental habit, that's the fixation. There's the core emotional habit, and then there's something happening on the level of the body and the action. That might be one dimension of it. Another might be sadness as the core adaptive, one of the emotions that grows up based on the kind of key coping strategy. But it's also things like what the coping strategy itself is. And I would say the 3 different heart types have slightly different strategies or ways of coping with that sadness. And the third thing might be a different kind of reactivity. But I'll let Uranio speak, because I think he might have something important to shed light on this.
I think you explained it really well, B, and I liked your question, Antonia, but I think we can answer it talking about one of the obstacles for heart types and then understand it more thoroughly and generically in the more conceptual question you had. So one of the obstacles is that 2s, 3s, and 4s, the heart types, don't feel they are enough. And being okay with myself and what I'm doing and with who I am is not enough. I need the other person to reassure me. I need the other person to be happy with me. So I need to live my life concerned all the times with how I am being seen. As other people don't do that all the time, it's almost like a little bit of a setup for sadness. So because of some intrinsic ideas or worldviews and paths that we consequently undertake for ourselves, and then also because of the emotional tendencies that Bea talked about, we all fall into traps like this. And I think that one of the traps that we need to mention for hard types is not feeling enough.
I have a quick clarifying thought or questions coming up. I'm contrasting what you're saying here about the heart types with the last episode and the body types. What I hear you saying here is that the one of the core obstacles that the heart triad has is this idea that they're not enough. And so the locus of feeling okay gets put onto other people. Like if other people see me in a good light, if I'm a heart type, or they see me in a positive way, then I feel okay about myself. But there's a disconnect. I don't always feel that. So there's sadness that people don't recognize my value or they don't affirm it in some way. Whereas the body types felt way more rooted. They felt more present in their physicality. Their locus was maybe too much on themselves, even to the point where they could lose themselves. But they were focused just on their own, like they were more certain of themselves. It wasn't on other people approving. It was more about them and their physicality and their presence and all of that. So am I drawing the right kind of distinction there between these two?
I think you got a very good point there, Joel, and thank you for bringing it up. I would say that one of the other obstacles that hard types have, they have too much focus on relationships. So relationships become really a very central part of their lives. They take it slightly differently when it comes to how they do relationships, depending on which of the three types in that triad we're talking about. However, relationships in general are super important for them to the point that it becomes a bit excessive. So there is too much focus on that. So what is a consequence of that? One of several is that they create too many expectations on relationships.
And I think there are a few other obstacles it's important to note about heart types related to this. There's a lot of focus on connection with others, and that's achieved through the heart center. So these are emotional types, but just like when we talked about the body center, that they're rooted in the body and that they're, in a way, they have more of a sense, they live more from bodily experience. There's also a way the body types can be out of touch with their body. There's a similar polarity with the heart type. So sometimes they can be too emotional. They can even think with their feelings instead of thinking objectively, because feelings can color everything. They can have strong emotions that get in the way of seeing things clearly, because again, they're out of balance in terms of seeing everything. The world or what they're experiencing is colored too much by a particular emotion they might be having. On the other hand, they can sometimes be out of touch with their emotions in a way that's not so good for them. They can be focusing on other people. They can be focusing on tasks, something to do with that coping strategy of how they're trying to get the world to see them in a positive light. And they can close their heart or not be fully in touch with their heart or their feelings as well. So it's always good to remember in the Enneagram that these things come in polarity. So there's one type 3, that can tend to habitually block out their awareness of their emotions, even though at a fundamental level, they are heart-based and they are emotional. They can separate their conscious awareness from their experience of their emotions, and that can create problems both for themselves and in relationships.
So just to add one more thing to this interesting discussion here, because emotions become way more intense than other inner resources, heart types, as Bea was explaining, lose touch with logic and some rationality, but they also lose touch with instinct. So let me try to explain this in an example. So heart types choose 3s and 4s, change course depending on the inner emotional atmosphere. Change course of projects, change course of how they are feeling in a relationship, and about, daily tasks even. So they are constantly changing course because of the emotions or the emotional atmosphere, as I said. That is both a disconnection from rationality, as I said, and from instinct, because they cease to bring to action a few things, and they change or don't implement something when they're feeling bad. So although several of the heart types, there are 3 types there and 9 subtypes, because there are 3 subtypes of each type. So all of those have their differences, and some of them are really committed to going forward and make things happen, but they are also prone to change the way and to be enthusiastic about something new, or to be sad about something that didn't happen, and they lose track.
We will be right back. If you're focused on personal growth, I think you'll resonate with our core content over at personalityhacker.com. We want to see you understand how your mind is wired so you can generate motivation, improve social skills, find career opportunities, and master excellent decision making. But a quick warning, we are advice and action focused in all of our articles, podcasts, and videos. This means that we attract people who like to be challenged to become excellent, to take action, to put in the work to optimize themselves, not simply just gather more information. If you are committed to personal growth and ready to radically find your inner truth, then come over and be a part of our growing community of like minds at Personality Hacker. Now back to the show.
Beatrice, you and I are both heart triad, or the center of intelligence people. And as you are talking, and I was going to kick this over to you to find out what your impression is on this. And I'm assuming that this also, again, sort of retroactively applies to people who are in the body center of intelligence as well, is the narrative of my life has perfectly fallen into place with all of what you're talking about. I don't know if I manifested it or what's going on, but I actually do feel like in my life, people have rejected me because I'm not doing what they want me to do. They're not accepting me as an individual. And I'm realizing that, I talked about how I think my parents are both in that body center of intelligence, and they really have become sort of like their life narrative is that people just aren't seeing how right they are. It's almost like we sort of end up manifesting a narrative that goes perfectly with our type or with our center of intelligence. Is that part of how our type manifests? Is that we end up living out this core fear or these, the thing that is at the center of it all, this challenge with, not being acceptable. And here I find myself in relationship after relationship where it's like, oh, it's not who I am, it's what I'm doing for you. Is that part of your Enneagram type in playing out the script, is that you end up creating circumstances that reinforce these fears or these underlying beliefs?
Yes, absolutely. That's one of the characteristics of the personality, is that it takes us around in circles because we try their personality defensive strategies and adaptations tries to get something we need, but it goes about it in kind of the wrong way. And we can't really take in when we do get it. And we sometimes block ourselves in the ways we go about trying to get it. Now, what you're speaking to speaks to a very important tension that's at the heart of heart types and creates a lot of the obstacles. And that is a tendency to get stuck in the tension between authenticity versus the need to attach or connect. All children can experience this from early age. So this can apply to all types, but heart types experience this as sort of the central dilemma. So we all experience in childhood the sense of, I'm getting a message from the outside world that in order for me to be able to attach to important figures in my life, which is how I get my needs met, I need to be what they want me to be. I need to be acceptable to them. But on the other hand, we also, all of us, have a need to be to express and be who we authentically essentially are. And so what happens is heart types get this sense that I can't really be who I am because I'll be rejected. So I need to be more what you want me to be so I can connect and attach to you and get what I need through that attachment. Two of the heart types, they end up kind of going a little bit more in the direction of attachment, and that is they shapeshift. And it's a little bit like what you were talking about, and twos and threes do this. So I do this and you do this. We shapeshift in order to engineer or create the conditions for connection, right? So I sense into what someone else likes, what they need, and I emphasize parts of myself that will line up with that, and I de-emphasize parts of myself that won't. So in essence, I'm being inauthentic to who I am, but there's this inner program that tells me I have to do that to survive. I have to be what the other person wants. Otherwise, they won't like me. They won't affirm me. They won't accept me. They won't love me. And that's how I get my needs met, is through that love connection, through that heart connection. Now, fours, on the other hand, they lean more in the direction of the authenticity side of that tension. They have an inner program that says, I need to be who I am, and I need to be understood and seen for who I am. And that's the only way I can really be okay. So they don't shapeshift as much, although certainly they can at times, especially under stress or when they feel disconnected or when they feel abandoned by someone. They can be motivated to say, okay, I'll try to be what you want me to be. I'll try to be good in the way that you may see me as good. But they feel more of the discomfort of going against their authentic self than twos and threes do. And again, remember, this is all very automatic and unconscious. It's so deeply rooted. But of course, like when you churn yourself into someone else to be what someone else wants you to be, to get the love and affirmation, you're not being yourself. And so not only is there sadness about not being able to be yourself and not being accepted as you truly are, but you also lose touch with who you really are. And twos and threes in personality lose touch with who they really are. They tend to not know, who am I really? How do I really feel about this? What is really important to me? So again, when we get to the sort of the pathway out of this personality loop, this dilemma, it's going to be about becoming much more conscious of these inner pressures to be what someone else wants you to be to get the love, versus what about my authentic self, and how can I be who I am in the world and manifest more of my truer self, and how I really feel.
This makes me think of imago work. You know, like that concept that you will unconsciously replicate the same relationships over and over until you learn the lessons from them. And it feels like, we talked about the body center last week, and I'm assuming that one of the advantages to knowing the Enneagram, regardless of what center of intelligence you're in, that we end up creating the very fear that we have based on our center of intelligence and then on our distinct type within it, almost like we just keep creating it over and over until we figure it out. But we're doing it unconsciously originally until the pain gets big enough so that we reflect back and go, why am I doing this to myself? What's going on here?
Yes. And I think all the types are built on a faulty assumption about the world. So heart types often have this assumption, I need to do something to earn love. I can't just be loved as I am.
Right. And so then you start to earn love, and then you go, hey, why are people only liking me for what I'm doing?
Yeah, which is a little bit more the script of type 3 inside the triad. For twos, it would be a different, also for fours, but you are really on to, a very important point, as be explained. Now, if I may add one obstacle which speaks to this, is that heart types tend to make almost everything personal. And this is part of what you guys were talking about, the self-fulfilling prophecy, which doesn't end well, and it's not only heart types that do this, it's all 9 types. It's what personality does. So when heart types make things personal, problems in relationships are created around expectations, around, what other people feel, because it's at times feels a bit complicated for others who are not heart types to be in a relationship with heart types, because it's like not knowing what to do to solve all the complex things that come up from the heart. So when the heart is really above other resources, a few things can get more difficult and complicated, at least in the eyes of other people. And I think that this has to do with setting ourselves up. Heart types end up setting themselves up for sadness and feeling that they are not being met, and that therefore their lives are not fulfilling and they are not enough. So it's a vicious circle that exists in all types, in all three triads. And for heart types, there is this need for mirroring, connected to what B explained, that happens from childhood, meaning that they see themselves when they are mirrored by other people, when other people celebrate things with them, or give them emotional responses, or when they simply show them who they are, can be even through words, but they need that. And it's super important for all human beings. But when in adulthood we still depend too much on mirroring, it's because something has not yet been developed, and that is self-esteem, self-appreciation, and the capacity to look inside and find out who I am without the need of other people telling me so.
Just like when we talked about the body types needing a little bit more heart and head in there, heart types can benefit from both the head and the body. And what I'm hearing is that the head brings a little bit of distance. I mean, this is me just speculating on what you mean, so correct me if I'm wrong. But if you're too much,
it's quite right, all you're saying.
Okay, when you're too much in your emotions, you need a little bit of distance from them. So the head center, or being able to access your thoughts a little bit more, creates a little bit of distance from that becoming overwhelmed by emotion. And then the instinct part, and I think this is something that's really clarifying for me right now, is when I was taking notes on the previous podcast, I wrote down, I have a right to ... There's like this instinctive part that goes, no, I'm right on this one. And then it rests into it. And of course, if you overdo that, then you get angry that other people aren't caring about that. But the disconnection from that instinct for heart types would be not really feeling you have a right. Like not really feeling that you have an ability to rely on your instinct, because then that makes you less reactive to other people, which is what your type is encouraging you to do, is to always be in response to others. So accessing the body instinct, or that body wisdom, allows you to go, no, it's okay. I can depend upon my own opinion of myself. I don't have to necessarily always be outsourcing that to others.
I think accessing the body center for heart types is a way of connecting to authenticity and feeling more validated about your authentic reactions or responses from the inside.
And I loved how you explained that, Antonia. The whole objective of studying and finding out what my dominant intelligence is to be able to see how I'm not using the other two intelligences. So when a heart type acknowledges that the heart energy is dominating all the space, then we open up some interest in heart types to develop more the resources of the head and the body. On top of what you said, there is a need for us to understand what things in life deserve what intelligence. So when a heart type, for instance, goes to plan something or to analyze something, or if they are just following through with things, but they are bringing in too much emotional intelligence while doing that, there won't be the best possible job being done. And at the same time, if they are just going ahead and pushing things forward, but still in the heart, they will need to stop to look to both sides and see how people are seeing them, and to get feedback or to connect again. And then they lose opportunities. It's the study of the centers of intelligence is also super important for us to stop wasting energy. Because what happens with the heart type, for instance, when they're feeling instead of doing the more appropriate thing at the moment, so what's happening then is that heart types are wasting energy and getting exhausted because they're overextending the role of the heart. And also the other two centers, they are sort of getting sad with the heart type person. They are almost looking at the person and say, here I am, please look at me. And that imbalance brings a lot of problems. And that's almost the definition of human beings in this level called personality. It's imbalance.
In the last episode, you did a fantastic summary of what's going on for people in the body center of intelligence. What would be a summary of, I mean, we've talked a lot about different elements, but what's a summary of what's going on for people in the heart center?
First of all, I would say heart types overdo emotions a lot of the time and sometimes underdo emotions. So see everything in the world is colored by emotions in a way that leads to misperceiving what's going on, or don't access enough their emotions, the wisdom of their emotions. Now, emotions bring information. A lot of us heart types have had a history of being put down for being emotional. So we need to be careful and not demonize emotion and not automatically think you're being too emotional and that's a bad thing, because that's a big trend in our culture. But again, like any of these things we're talking about, it's about balance. It's about not overdoing it and not underdoing it. So the heart types can tend to overdo or underdo the way they're living life through their emotions, or seeing life too much in terms of emotion, or blocking that out so that they don't consider the importance of emotions enough at times. What being emotional leads to often is wanting to connect to others through emotion. So there's a big focus on relationships, on relating to others, on connection, and sometimes too much of a focus. Like relationships are everything. Twos tend to see work, like, their work life, through the lens of relationships. And so there's almost too much importance put on the role of relationships, and they take things too personally. They can be oversensitive and define themselves on the inside based on how other people treat them. Another big obstacle related to this is the role of image, or an over focus on creating an image for the world. And what that leads to is an over identification with a kind of false self. Now, in the Enneagram, we have the idea of personality, but we also have the idea that as you grow, you get more and more in touch with your essential self, or a kind of true self. And so when heart types are trying to create connections, they often have this unconscious belief that they have to do so through creating an image or a false self that other people will find acceptable, because they have an underlying belief that people won't love them and want to connect with them as they truly are. So that's a big obstacle, like thinking you are your image or your persona, or who the person that you've turned yourself into to try to earn love from the outside, which blocks your awareness and acceptance internally of who you really are, that your feelings are okay, that what you want and who you are and your sense of self is totally lovable and okay and acceptable without needing that validation from the outside world. And then there's the obstacle having to do with sadness. So fours can overdo their sadness, and they can get too much mired in sadness, and that can distort their perception of the world. Threes cannot be enough in touch with their sadness, and their sadness as an indicator of what's truly going on with them at a deeper level within their true self. They can ignore that or not be in touch with it and sort of lose their inner compass of who they are and what their true self really feels, just naturally occurring feelings that help them know who they are. And then twos can kind of go against sadness and repress it and avoid it some of the time, unconsciously, of course, or it can kind of back up on them and they can get too sad when they feel rejected or disapproved of, or they're not getting their needs met by the outside world. And again, there's too much focus for twos on having their needs met from the outside world, and not enough. They get blocked or have an obstacle to growth when they don't learn to love themselves, and when they don't learn to kind of get out of that personality loop of trying to get people to relate to them in positive ways. But the way they do that sometimes unintentionally drives people away, when they can rise up out of that and learn to love and value themselves from the inside and not need the affirmation as much from the outside world. And again, this applies to all three heart types. That's when they really get free of that. And of course, all of this points to this dilemma inside for heart types, this irresolvable dilemma between, can I be my authentic self, or do I have to be someone else in order to connect with others? And when 2s, 3s, and 4s can get more conscious of all this, when they can bring this into consciousness, they can create more balance. They can see things more in the proper perspective. And that is the perspective that aligns more with reality, that aligns more with a balance of the three centers. And of course, as Uranio said, it's really important that 2s recognize the obstacle of being out of balance and over focusing on the emotional level of life and not taking into account all the ways they can use their head to be more objective, to analyze what's really happening here, and also they can block their connection to their body center, which can give them an inner sense of, this is who I am. This is what I feel is right. This is my authentic self. This is the way I need to create order and structure and control and mastery in my own life based on my own gut feel of things. When they get disconnected from the head and the body and overdo the heart, they get stuck in being out of balance. But when they can align all three, that's when they're really growing.
If someone's listening right now and they're identifying with this heart center, they're resonating with some of the things you're talking about, and they're like, I'm pretty sure I'm probably a 2, 3, or 4. What should they do about that? Like, where do they go next? Do they determine their type and they go down that road? Like, what are some general statements you could give us to help someone on their journey going forward?
After finding out your type, then it's time to engage with another, even more exciting part of the Enneagram system, which is knowing what your particular path of development is and how to do it in the most efficient way. So there are many ways to do that, but it's usually something that requires exchanging this with other people of the same type and participating in in-depth opportunities like retreats. So there's a lot that can be done. But first, you need to understand your personality, and then don't stop there. Just go on and engage with your path of growth.
One of the resources I'd like to direct people to is the book you both have written together. And it's out now at all major book retailers. Would you just give us the title and a little bit more about this book for people that want to go further?
Yes, it's called The Enneagram Guide to Waking Up. And the subtitle is Find Your Path, Face Your Shadow, Discover Your True Self. And it's an introductory book, but instead of just describing the 9 types, it really sets out a 3-step growth path for each one of the 9 types. So you learn about your type as you're learning about exactly what your growth path is. First, identifying some of the patterns associated with your type that tend to be more conscious, that you can kind of see, oh yeah, I tend to do this all the time. Oh, there I go again. But then looking deeper at some of the more unconscious patterns that tend to be blind spots, or in what Jung called the shadow, and really working to make those more conscious. Sometimes that involves feeling some of the pain that you may have buried, that your personality defenses are set up to keep you from feeling. And then knowing what you can aspire to, knowing a little bit about the high side of what's waiting for you in a positive sense once you face your shadow and work through some of your less conscious patterns and develop more flexibility.
Thank you both again for being on this episode this week. Next week, we're going to continue on to the head center of intelligence, which is mine. So I'm excited to talk about
and
that.
Uranio's.
Yeah, and Uranio's. So I'm excited to unpack some of these ideas and obstacles. In the meantime, where can people find out more about what you all do? Beatrice and Uranio, where should we direct people to go to find links to your books, resources, your membership site, all of that? What's the website?
They can go to cpenneagram.com, short for Chestnut Paes Enneagram.com, cpenneagram.com, where they can find online self-guided courses, a membership platform with a lot of Enneagram content, and information about our live courses and a connection to our Enneagram 2.0 podcast.
Yeah. And that's, by the way, that's an amazing resource. It is filled with information, and highly recommend you go check them out there. And once again, thank you so much for joining us on this episode and the second episode of this 3-part series.
Thank you. It's been great to be here talking about the Enneagram again with you.
Yeah, thank you, Joel and Antonia. It's always wonderful to be with you.
And if you enjoyed this podcast, you can subscribe to us on iTunes and various Android platforms. If you leave a rating and review for us on iTunes, that helps us out a lot. And if you would like to invest in yourself and your Enneagram growth path, head over to personalityhacker.com, and under our suite of programs, you'll see the Enneagram starter kits that is a lot of love baked into them from Joel, myself, and from Beatrice and Uranio. We partnered up on these Enneagram starter kits. They're beautiful. They're amazing. So go check those out as well.
My name is Joel Mark Witt.
And I'm Antonia Dodge.
And we'll talk with you on the next Personality Hacker podcast. If you're focused on personal growth, I think you'll resonate with our core content over at personalityhacker.com. We want to see you understand how your mind is wired so you can generate motivation, improve social skills, find career opportunities, and master excellent decision making. But a quick warning, we are advice and action focused in all of our articles, podcasts, and videos. This means that we attract people who like to be challenged to become excellent, to take action, to put in the work to optimize themselves, not simply just gather more information. If you are committed to personal growth and ready to radically find your inner truth, then come over and be a part of our growing community of like minds at Personality Hacker.